CardGamesTV1 Podcast. So I was just on Uni DBS. Wait, I said it wrong. MicroRecords DBS. A stream that he was doing tonight, and we had a difference of views on something. Well, the thing is, I made a statement and he disagreed, even though he actually proved my point, which was draw greed, the concept of draw greed, the idea of players drawing a lot just for the sake of drawing, just because they want to have, card advantage, right? They want to see more cards. They want to play search cards to get certain cards. They're trying to get as much cards as they want because they're trying to have as many options, as many lines of play as they could do, which is common sense. Like, well, duh, that's what they want. But that's the point. Draw greed is not saying that. I'm not saying that it's wrong for them to want to draw. What I'm saying is draw greed, the fact that people tend to focus on playing decks and strategies that mainly have a lot of draw effects. Some decks are popular just because they draw a lot, like a launch was even though there's tons of decks that can do what launch does, it's because launch draws a lot, is why launch is preferred over those types of those other decks, because she draws a lot. What else? What was it? Icarus draws a lot. That's why it was more popular than any other, yellow leader, is because it drew a lot. Recently I've been playing, I played against multiple times against Trunks Jita. That's what people call it, Trunks Jita, and it draws a lot. Like, my opponent has like 30 cards in their hands while I'm, when I'm playing against them, and I will have like 4 cards versus their 30. 4 cards in my hands versus their 30 cards in their hands. But I still be, laying down the smackdown. So obviously, hand advantage doesn't matter that much if you have a strategy like me, where 1 or 2 cards is more than enough for me to do what I'm trying to do, because I have a strategy, I have a plan that ignores a 30+ card hand size, because I already took that to account. Oh yeah, my opponent can have 60 cards in their hands. I don't care. It's not going to stop me from doing what I'm trying to do, right? Because I already took that to account. But anyway, the point is that the whole draw greed. So if my opponent draws 30 cards and then I play, because this all stems from the idea of mill strategy, Uni DBS is like, nah, man, mill shouldn't be in the game. And his argument for it is that because we draw a lot in this game, even though tons of other card games do the same thing, they have draw effects, card advantage, drawing cards, or draw greed as I call it in this example, is normal. It's players that gravitate to draw effects, that gravitate to the idea of drawing a whole bunch of cards, because that drastically reduces being skillful. See, part of being skillful is take whatever you have. Like, if you only have 5 cards, make the most of it. That's where skill will come in. But if you have 30 cards in your hands, that's less skill, because you got 30 cards, so now you just gotta choose the best cards out of those 30 cards. You're not making the most out of those 30 cards. You're just looking for the best cards out of them and then use them, and the rest of the cards are irrelevant. The rest are trash. The rest are good as combo fodder, and that's all there will ever be, because they don't matter as for when you're actually going to play the game. When you're going to make a play, you're going to play your best cards, right? You're not going to play a whole bunch of these random little tech cards, when you're trying to go for game. You're just going to use them as combo fodder. So this whole idea of like, drawing a lot is very, very important. And so important that we need to take mill out of the game. Like, no. And that's the point. His argument was mill shouldn't be in the game, specifically this game, because we draw a lot. As if other games don't draw equally as much or even more. But anyway, the main point is that the draw greed thing is like, you're supposed to be, if you draw a lot, see, when you draw a lot, that's good against hand control. So the way we mitigate hand control is by drawing a lot, right? The way you mitigate mill is by having a bigger deck. That's why Bandai allowed us to increase the deck size from 50 to 60. So now we can have 60 card decks. And of course, he was against the idea. It's like, nah, you play 60, you lose your consistency. But aren't you the one saying that we draw so much that we have options and access to all our best cards? Then why would consistency go out the window if you're playing a 60 card deck when you're drawing 30 cards a turn? You know what I mean? So that's the thing. You're contradicting yourself by saying, oh, we draw a lot. Oh, but it'd be a bad idea to play a 60 card deck because you will lose consistency. But consistency of what? Drawing a lot? You're drawing a lot, which means you'll have access to all the cards. If anything, having a 60 card deck means you're going to have 10 more cards to draw. That's all that means. Not less consistency. You'll have more options. So you have more options because you're going to be drawing all those extra cards you put in the deck. Since we draw so much in this game, apparently, you'll have access to all that. If your deck doesn't draw that much, then yes, you should play a deck less than 60, obviously, a 50 card deck. And hopefully have some deck thinning cards in there, search cards and stuff like that, things that can thin out the deck so that you can increase your chances of drawing, since you draw very little, drawing those good cards. But if you have a deck that draws 5 cards a turn, then play 60. That's 10 extra cards you can main deck. You can main deck some floodgates. You can main deck some tech cards, some spice. Kryptonite, as some people like to call it. Something you can use to beat a deck. Silver bullets, the other term people like to use. Silver bullets, right? Something that can, you play it, bang, it wrecks your opponent's deck, right? So, if anything, you should want to play 60 cards, because one, that helps you mitigate mill decks, right? You're going to, because since you like to draw a lot, you're going to be drawing a lot anyway, right? 5 cards per turn. So you're always going to get consistency. The only thing I really hear here, the only thing that's really true, the real reason he doesn't like mill is because he doesn't want his cards to go to the drop. He wants to draw the cards. He doesn't want them to get milled. So that's his argument. That's his real issue, is he doesn't like his one-ofs going to the drop, like his ultimate or something like that, like his baby hatchet or some shit like that. He doesn't want, he doesn't want his precious cards to go to the drop. He wants to draw them. That's his only real thing against mill, is that he doesn't want to lose the ability to draw his good stuff. But that's the point of mill. It's supposed to get rid of your good stuff. It's supposed to make it hard for you to get to your good stuff. That's the point of mill, right? It's just always ironic this when somebody has a strategy that works really well, they don't want there to be a fairness to it. And the fairness would be a way to combat it, a way to go against it. Imagine if we didn't have the ability to draw on the front side of our leaders. What if we didn't have unisons to let us draw? What if we didn't have battle cards to let us draw? What if we didn't have drawing engines like what is the pot of, the one drop pod thing where Frieza's, what is it, Frieza's pod? Frieza's pod thing where you draw a card every time you play a battle card, green battle card from your drop, right? Little draw engines, and just do something like that, or play something, or like the draw ape, right? Where you pay 2 warp the draw ape from your warp and draw 2 cards, right? That kind of stuff, right? We choose to play cards to draw. We even play, the ones who play super combos that draw anyway, play super combos to draw cards. There's even super combos where you draw 2 and bottom deck 1 or some shit like that, or you bottom deck a card then draw 2, something like that. I don't use them, but you get the point. Those exist. So it's like players choose to draw, not the game. The game doesn't tell you to draw cards. You choose to play cards to draw cards. There's plenty of leaders that don't draw cards. There's leaders that say say mill, like burst 3 instead. Literally, you have leaders that tell you, right, by their effect, to mill 3 of your own cards. Every time you trigger this effect, mill 3 of your own cards. Shit, we had, what's his name? Vegix used to mill 5, now it's 3. But there was a time he used to mill 5, and that was OP milling. So it's kind of funny to complain about mill. And then he tried to talk about skill, like the skill necessary to draw versus the skill necessary to mill. And it's like, that's a bad example, because the same process is used in both scenarios. You swing with your Janima leader, for example, your opponent mills 2, yeah. But you swing with your leader, you draw 1. Or if you have a draw 2 leader, where you pitch a card and draw 2, right? So you're essentially replacing that 1 for 2, right? and that deck is more likely, has a strategy that lets you play the cards you threw into your drop in the first place, then you're just benefiting from it. Then, it'd be awesome if they errata the, what's his name? I wish they do, because that'd be awesome. The errata the yellow Sin Shinron, and make it where you pitch a Shadow Dragon to draw 2 cards. That way you can fill up your drop, but draw into your, your negates and your unisons and shit like that. So that way you can stall long enough, right, to get to the 6 energy and then bring back all the Shadow Dragons. In order to get that similar effect, I had to put a unison in the deck. It's a Vegito, I think it was a Vegito unison, where you pitch, but you have to pitch 2 cards. So you pitch 2 yellow cards to draw 2 cards. So I put that in there just so I can get that effect. But it'd be cool if they errated the leader, so that way it feeds itself, right? If by dropping Shadow Dragons to the drop, it feeds the drop for the leader's ultimate, right? It's a Awaken effect, and then of course you can sift a cycle through your deck and get certain key cards like your retaliation coolers and shit like that, right? For your counter strategy, right? Things of that nature. So that would be a nice upgrade for the Sin Shinron leader if they added that to the leader's front side. So that'd be cool. But anyway, the point is like, it was funny. He was like, it takes, if I'm right, he was trying to imply that it takes more skill to draw cards, because you have to build your deck to draw cards. Like, oh, that's weird. You have to build your deck to draw cards. Then that means that's a player's choice, because you built your deck to draw. It's not the game. The game implies that the deck, the leader already comes with the ability to draw 5 cards a turn. Ironically, there is a leader that lets you draw 5 cards, but you gotta have no cards in your hands if I'm right in order to trigger the effect. And I think it's only during the end of your turn anyway. It's the 5-drop Bobbity leader. I mean, not 5-drop. I mean the Black Bobbity leader. Anyway, point is, it was just weird to even try to argue. It's like, your argument contradicts itself. You're trying to make it sound like one requires more skill than the other, but in reality, they both do the same. They both require the same actions. Swing with a leader, your opponent mills. It's not too different from swinging with your leader and drawing a card. Those 2 actions don't require much skill. It just requires you to actually perform the action. Plus, we have a lot of cards that don't require a lot of skills, a lot of intelligence anyway. So the idea of arguing that drawing a lot of cards require high IQ or you're a highly skilled player by drawing a lot of cards, like, that's not highly skilled. That's the opposite. That's the opposite of skill. It's like saying you're very smart when you take an open book test. I'm smart. I know how to look through this book of answers and find the answer and then put it on the test and get an A on the test. I'm super smart. No, you're not. You have at least the basic skill of reading. You got that. You understand where to find the answers to the questions. So in other words, you're good at Googling, but doesn't make you an Albert Einstein. It doesn't make you a genius. But it was just kind of ironic how he was trying to make it sound, I didn't want to take it personal, but if I think about it, kind of sounds like he was trying to take a jab at me with that, talking about, anybody who disagrees with drawing a whole bunch of cards is clearly low skill and not good at the game. I think that's what he was trying to imply. And it's like, well, if that's the case, then, well, that's incorrect, but obviously that's not how the reality works. It's like, if you're good at something, right, you tend to be able, see, the thing is, what makes somebody good at something versus other people is that they do what other people don't do. What makes Michael Jordan so great, right, the GOAT, is because he does what a lot of other players don't do. He plays in a way that other players don't do. This is why he's Air Jordan and everybody else is just a basketball player. Even though dunking is not unique in the game, he's not the only one that dunks, but he's the one who dunks the most, right? That's why he's called Air Jordan. He has a way of being able to dunk from a far distance because he has hops like that. Not only has vertical, he has horizontal, and he improved upon that. Granted, some of it is genetics because he's a tall son of a gun, but it's the fact that he put a lot of time, a lot of time and practice into developing that vertical and horizontal technique that allows him to be able to go from the free throw line or even beyond that, even half court. Let's say half court. If I'm right, he can run from half court, right, and jump and be able to dunk from half court. If I'm right, I could be wrong, but you get my point. I mean, think about how impressive that would be if he always dunks from half court, right? Now I can shoot and make a shot from half court. Most players can. Most players cannot. So the thing is that what makes somebody really good at something is their ability to do what most other people can't do. Because if I could do what everybody else can do, then I'm not special, right? Then what I'm doing is not that good. It's okay, right? But that makes me common. That makes me mid. That doesn't, that makes me average. That doesn't make me above average. So if we're talking about somebody being a good player, that means the person has to do what everybody else isn't doing. So trying to say, oh, drawing a lot of cards is what makes you a good player. No, that makes you mid or basic at best. That makes you mid because everybody draws a lot, right? Everybody's looking for decks that draw a lot. If a leader says draw 2 cards, people are going to play it automatically. Even if the rest of the deck is trash, they're going to give it a try. They'll be like, you know what, I'm going to take a lot of the cards from that archetype out because they're trash, they're mid at best, and then just put some better cards in. That's what they would do. They would put better cards. But again, that's the player's choice. Players choose that. It's just so funny, that constant thing of trying to put negativity towards the company or the game itself, but try to put a lot of positivity towards players. Oh, if you draw a lot, you're a good player. You can't blame players for drawing a lot. You gotta blame the game for players drawing a lot. No, you put the blame on the players because they're the ones who choose to draw a lot. Not every player plays a deck that draws a lot. Some players actually do play old leaders that don't draw on the front side, only draw on the back side. There are some players who don't awaken their leader until like turn 4 or 5. Most people try to awaken on turn 2. And again, that's player preference. That's not the game telling you or making you do anything. That's another thing. Talking about the game, the cards themselves, as if they can speak to you, as if they can tell you what to do and how you're supposed to play the game. It's like, no, you, the player, tell yourself how to play the game. You, the player, choose if you're going to draw a lot, if you're going to let your opponent attack you for game or not, right? You choose when you combo, when you don't combo. You choose when you counterplay, when you don't counterplay. You choose when you block, when you don't block. You negate when you don't negate. Like, you choose that. That's the importance. I value players, yes. I value players over decks because any deck can top an event if the player actually knows how to play the game. The game. Actually understands how simple the game is on the most basic level of the game. It is still weird for people to still try to make the game sound more complicated, and definitely is super weird to try to make the game sound like it talks to you, like it tells you what you're supposed to do. It's like, no, you choose what you do. When new cards come out, you look at them, you read them, you see what the card can do, what abilities the cards have, and then you decide if you're going to use them or not. Right? The cards themselves don't tell you what to do. They don't tell you what you should play. Right? Like, for example, Soul Striker is popular because players choose Soul Striker. In reality, every blue leader is viable. Every blue leader wants you to play them, right? If you want to look at the idea of cards talking to you, right? Then every blue leader wants you to play with them. They have abilities and effects that are useful if you care to use them. So the whole Soul Striker thing being the most popular blue leader, that's players' choice. Players choose that. It's not the game, it's the players. Like, the old saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Well, in this regards, it's the opposite. Right? Don't hate the game, hate the players, because the players are the ones who decide what is and isn't meta, right? What is and isn't a certain format, right? They're the ones who decide what leaders will and will not be used, what tech cards will not be used, right? What spice, what is staples, right? Because we have staples. A lot of people still, do be talking about like, God Sealing Trunks in blue and Senzo Bean and stuff like that, and they still talk about certain cards, being staples in certain decks. If you play green, you're playing Dormant Potential Unleashed, Charismatic Villain Frieza, right? Rebrand, things of that nature. And it's like, yeah, fair enough. There are staples. There are some, cards that are generically good enough to be used in every deck that uses a certain color of leader or just certain colors, period. Yeah, but the thing is, we can be unique and different. We can create different strategies. I have a thing I call death and taxes. Death and taxes is a term from Magic, which is based off of an expression of the only thing guaranteed in life is death and taxes. If I'm right, Benjamin Franklin said that. Anyway, it was either him or Einstein, one of the two. Anyway, point is I call it different taxes because of the fact that it has has cards that board wipe, and it has cards that if your opponent plays counter skills, they'll take damage. So it'll cost them, right, taxes as it were. It'll cost them to play those cards. So it'll be a very pricey price to pay. Especially if you're using a blocker negate. You're already taking a life to play a blocker negate for free, right? And then taking extra damage because you play a counter play. So that's 2 life you lose right there and then. So if you only have 2 life, you automatically kill yourself just trying to negate. But if you don't negate, right, my attack is gonna go through. And my attack is probably double strike anyway, right? So you're damn if you do, damn if you don't, and that's why death and taxes are guaranteed, right? And then of course, I got board wiping cards to clear my opponent's board. So that concept, that strategy, I'm using it with a couple leaders. I'm definitely using just the effect of if my opponent would use a counter skill to deal them damage. Using that as a form of counter. I made a video about it already, about using it as a form of counter to make it hard for your opponent to negate your game-winning attack. Right, so you could play this card that would deal your opponent damage if they play a counter skill, right? Then overwhelm something, for example, right? Play something for free or cheap, and then if your opponent tries to counterplay it, like God Seal or something like that, or Charismatic Freezer or anything similar to that, boom, they take damage. And you can, obviously finish them off with like a leader swing or something, right? That kind of stuff. So being able to play stuff for free, and if your opponent tries to counter it, or if you attack and they try to negate your attack, bang, they'll get burned. And they're usually going to have maybe 1 to 2 life anyway. By the time you do that they're pretty much just killing themselves trying to not lose the game. Right, the irony. That's the whole point of it, right? You're putting them in a bad situation. That doesn't require a lot of cards. That requires like 2 to 3 cards at most. So drawing 5 cards plus per turn is irrelevant. It's not unuseful. I'm just saying it's irrelevant. It's not like you need to have that many cards. You just need a couple cards. So drawing a lot so you can get to those cards is important. As long as you have a strategy and a win condition to win, you'll win. So you shouldn't care about people playing mill. And the funny thing is, this is all about just defending the concept of mill in the game, because it's like, well, one, not a lot of mill decks are topping at the current moment, or in the past 2 years, I should say. And if they are being played, they're being played, here and there, but they're not winning events. So trying to be like, oh, we draw a lot, that's why we shouldn't have mill, but it's like, but mill ain't top and dominating. Ironically, mill is very problematic in Magic. Yet he tried to use the argument that this game draws more than even Magic. Like Magic doesn't draw as much as this game does, according to him. But the irony is that mill is more prevalent in Magic than it is in this game or any other game similar to it. The most common way people lose is through like burn or OTKs, FTKs, turn 2 kills, that type of stuff, FTKs, some type of auto win strategy, some alternate win con. So mill is not as prevalent in this game as we would like it to be. people who like the idea of being able to win through mill will like more mill cards because we don't mill fast enough. Even if our opponent is playing 50 card decks and are drawing a lot, like 5 cards per turn, hypothetically, right? I mean, logically, you should be drawing three cards a turn, right? One for your leader, one for your turn, and one for your units if you're playing a draw unison, like most of us are. You're drawing 3 cards a turn. All right? So, even with drawing 3 cards a turn, with a 50 card deck, you're still more likely going to win by turn 3 or 4, depending on what your deck, if you're playing aggro or not. You're more likely going to win before you even deck out. You know what I mean? In order for you to truly deck out, you need to get to turn 5 or turn 6, and your opponent has to be playing some like big mill strategy, like something where like, oh, minus all your battle cards, and they die, and now you mill a whole bunch of cards because of it, right? Like the good old Android 18 mill strategy. Ironically, that strategy is still a little viable. I did recently see a battle card that can hit tokens, can minus 15k to the tokens. I forgot what card was that. Well, one we still have access to Vegeta, but there's another card. Is it a Vegeta card? No, it's another card. It's not Vegeta. I forgot. I just recently saw the card. I'm like, I would like to use this card. I think it is a Vegeta card. Like a 3-drop Vegeta, I think. Red, mono red Vegeta, where you can minus 15k to all your opponent's battle cards. And that hasn't been errata to avoid tokens, so you can still do the whole token, clone token strategy, and then play that. Because the 5-drop, 5-drop full power Frieza, that's been hit. I should not hit, errated, so that way it can't hit tokens. It's still a good card. It still, can do what it does, but it can't hit tokens, so it's not as powerful as it used to be. But we do have alternatives, and that's the thing. It's always trying to find ways to make things happen, and that's further proof that players choose what we do and don't do in this game, not the game itself, and it's definitely not the company. The company creates the card game. We decide what the game is, based off of the decisions we make, based off of what we consider to be good cards versus bad cards. Literally, none of the cards have like a little word on it that says this card is good, and then every other card that says bad on it is a bad card. Like, no, there's no such thing as that. Players choose. You decide if a card is good or not. Right? I should know that very well, considering the fact that I use a lot of cards that at first most people don't think is good, but then I show that it is good, and then everybody uses it. But ironically, no one gives me credit for it, but whatever. And that's the end of oh no, I still have time. I mean, I'm at work. My shift is starting. I just got my violin raised. Yeah. I got the cool alternate art ones, and these are non-foil, which is good because it makes it good for competitive play. I don't like using foil cards when I play, when I play competitively, because foil cards can, they can bend and stuff, and then that creates a problem, makes it hard to shuffle your deck. Plus, foiling makes the card thicker and whatnot. I like my deck to be thin. If I'm playing a 50 card deck, I don't want it to look like a 100 card deck, right? What else? It was just interesting, Got none against UniDBX. In case some people think I do, just because I'm talking about the discussion. It's just a topic. So let's not get anything misconstrued. It's just it's just a topic. He made some points. I'm making some points, just the counterpoints. Noticing some contradiction. Because I said something, and then he started talking and started essentially disagreeing with what I was saying, but didn't realize that what he was saying actually proves my point. But of course, he's not going to agree that he proved my point, because the first thing he said was the idea that players like to draw a lot of cards, and players like to have, a hand advantage. And then that's where he went off into the whole, good players draw a lot of cards. If you don't agree with drawing a lot of cards, that doesn't make you a good player. That kind of talk. And it's like, you're proving my point, which is players choose to draw a lot of cards. It's not the game. The game doesn't force you or make you draw cards. You do that. You choose leaders that deliberately have draw effects on the front side. Whether it's draw 2 when you awaken, draw when you attack. Just like no one forces you to play Soul Striker. You choose to play Soul Striker because of its effect, because of its untapping energy effect. You choose that. The game doesn't force you to choose that. You choose that. It's not like this game is about untapping energy. That's just a effect you could take advantage of as a player who chooses to play that strategy and plays that energy, that untapping strategy. But if you're the type of player that don't need to untap energy, then that leader is useless to you, because you don't need to untap energy because it's useless to you. Just like a super combo that draws a card is useless to a mill player. If my strategy is to mill my opponent, then a super combo is useless in that scenario. Unless, because I had the idea and I would like this to be a super combo, is a super combo when you combo with it, your opponent mills 2. That'd be nice. So I might as well bring up that idea since I'm talking about mill strategies. And, that'd be cool, right? A mill 2. Because I originally wanted a super combo that makes your opponent discard a card. And they gave me Android 18 Bionic Blitz, which I'm, happy for. But then, now I'm like, ooh, it'd be nice to have a super combo where your opponent mills 2. To be fair, I guess just mill 1 card would probably be enough. But I would prefer mill 2. That'd be awesome, right? Because that mill 2 might make a huge difference between winning and losing, right? Especially if you're a mill player, your win con is milling your opponent and taking advantage that your opponent draws a lot of cards. So if somebody wants to draw 30 cards a turn, they're supposed to lose to mill. If somebody likes to burst 3 to 5 cards a turn, they're supposed to lose to mill. You're supposed to be punished for greed, right? Of anything. If for example, a Goku swap, not Goku swap, 1-2 swap, right? The old Bardock strategy, where you just kept bouncing to your hand and kept taking a life. You're supposed to lose to a Champa double strike attack when you do that. You're supposed to lose to a Champa mirror absorb when that happens. That's supposed to happen. You're supposed to lose to that effect. So, like I said, you can when there is every strategy, every mechanic is supposed to have a counter, right? You're supposed to have some way you can deal with it, right? But of course, you do want some cards that are hard to deal with. Certain, especially if it's meant to be a win con, you want some win cons that are hard to deal with, to interact with. Because it's not a win con if you can easily interact with it. So you got to have some win cons that are hard to interact with. That way they can be win cons. Other than that, they'll just be cards. But, just the idea of hating Mill just because, that's not the only thing he hated. Apparently he's not a fan of Hatchiak. Okay. But the funny thing is, even when it comes to Hatchiak, there's ways around it, right? There's ways to override the leader's effect, to make it where the leader's effect is irrelevant. Stuff like dual attack, playing stuff that's 8 cost and higher, things of that nature. Just like I got to deal with somebody untapping 2 energy every turn, or untapping 3 energy every turn, like with the Gamma 1 and Gamma 2 deck, right? My opponent untapping 3 energy every turn after they already used it. Yeah, it's going to be a problem, right? Because essentially that's just the new Soul Striker, so to speak. That's what I called it in the chat. But it's another way of looking at it is that it's you know, Super Saiyan 3 2.0, right? Because Super Saiyan 3 leader, when you're on the Awakened side, you untap 3 energy at the end of your turn. So it's just, a blue leader that untaps energy. Oh, that's a surprise, right? So nothing new there. But the fact that it has restrictions, yes. He pointed out that the Gamma leader has some restrictions. It's like, well, that's good. Should have restrictions. Because if it didn't, it'd be very, very, very powerful outside of its, archetype, right? Outside of the deck's strategy. The deck should have limits. That way, if people want that, just lost track of what I was saying. But yeah, draw greed. Just the idea of drawing a lot of cards, and not saying that that's wrong. What I'm saying is that is a thing. There is such thing of draw greed. The idea of you drawing a lot because you choose to, not because you are forced to. There's no such thing as being forced to draw a lot of cards. That's something you choose based off of choosing a leader that lets you draw a lot, or playing cards that let you draw. That's a personal choice. That's a player's choice. And I don't like it when someone tries to take away accountability, responsibility from a player, for example, and then put it onto a card game, right? An inanimate object, trying to blame cards for human behavior, player choices, right? Player decisions. It's like saying card game players aren't toxic. It's the cards that make them toxic. No, it ain't. It's the player. The human being is the toxic one, not the cards. Because I do notice that in like other card games, especially Yu-Gi-Oh, they'll try to use the term, these degenerate cards, these degenerate combos. I was like, no, don't blame the cards for players choosing to play a strategy that you don't like. You don't like somebody playing an FTK, okay, then hate that the person playing an FTK. But don't hate the cards, don't hate the deck. That makes no sense. To hate inanimate objects, to hate pieces of cardboard for a player choosing stuff. Remember, these cards are just representations of the decisions we want to make, right? We can only do certain things, right? I can only turn into ties with Enter 17 if I play the card. But I gotta play it. I gotta choose to play the card. Then I gotta play a deck that lets me play it to get the effect off. And then I gotta choose when is the best time for me to use it. Right? It makes no sense for me to play Turn of Ties when my opponent has 8 life. It's better to play Turn of Ties when my opponent has 4 or less life, because I have a higher chance of ending them out, with a couple attacks after I play. So the best time would be, when they have 4 or less life. So again, it's players' choice. So players gotta take accountability. So draw greed is a thing, because that has to do with players, having the mindset of abundance, right? The mindset of I have to have the most, because it's not that different from somebody in real life, money greed, right? A billionaire who's already rich still wants lots of money. There's an opportunity to get $1 million, instead of them letting somebody else get that $1 million, so that way they can at least have some money, because they're probably broke. No, they want to have it, even though they're already a billionaire. They don't need the money, they just want it, and that's why we call it greed. We call it greed, not need. If you need the money, then you should have it, right? But if you already have money, you wanting more of it at the expense of someone else, that's greed. And that's why it's wrong, because you're literally taking something out of somebody else, taking an opportunity away from somebody else, right? But anyway, that's for that idea. But the point is like draw greed is just, when you are constantly using effects that let you draw a whole bunch of cards, aka you're being greedy, right? With all that draw power, don't be surprised if you lose to mill, or you lose just because you drew so much. It's like, oh shit, I drew so much that I milled myself out, or I decked myself out. It's like, yeah, well, that's draw greed. That's the effect of draw greed, especially when you're not paying attention to the fact that you're drawing so much that happens. And I've been in some similar scenarios like that where I was drawing a whole bunch, and then I realized, oh shit, like I'm drawing so much, I'm deck thinning so much that I'm literally decking myself out just because of all this drawing, you know. And I didn't need to draw all those cards. It's just that I had the ability to do so, so I did so. I fell victim to draw greed, right? That is something that can happen and does happen. And I just gave it a description, a term called draw greed. And I've seen it many times. Some people try to use the whole draw greed concept as a selling point for me to use certain things like super combos. Well, drawing is good. You gotta draw. Everything has to have draw effects. Super combos, draw. Yeah, draw greed. I get it. I understand some people are addicted to it, addicted to the idea of drawing, having a lot of stuff. Right? I get it. It's the mindset of abundance. It's all about plussing. It's all about getting more than someone else. I get it. You want to draw 3 to 4 cards a turn while your opponent's only drawing 1 or 2 cards a turn. I get it. But because of it, if your opponent's playing a mill strategy, you're supposed to lose because you were greedy with all that draw power. And the other thing is, you're drawing a lot of cards, but for what? You draw a lot of cards and then nothing happens, right? You draw a whole bunch of cards and you still lose. So make sure everything you do is for a purpose. If you're going to draw a whole bunch of cards, it better be for a purpose. It can't be just for, it gives me a lot of options. So does playing a deck that has specific cards for the specific purpose of being used at a specific turn to win you the game at a specific time frame, like turn 4, turn 5, right? As opposed to trying to draw a whole bunch of cards and then hoping that, by trying to play as many cards as possible, that might win you the game, because that's just more of relying on luck and less of skill. So there's definitely not more skill in drawing a whole bunch of cards. That's just ridiculous to think that drawing more cards equals more skill. It doesn't. Actually, it's the opposite. It's less skill, because it's no different from putting training wheels on a bike. Like, oh, look at me, I could pop a wheelie on a bike. You have training wheels on. Obviously you can. Obviously you're not going to fall over because you got training wheels on, right? So not impressed. Anyone could do that, even my grandma. But if you take the training wheels on and pop a wheelie, then that would be impressive, because you're doing something that isn't easy to do, which is to stay balanced and not fall over. But if you have training wheels, you're not likely to fall over, right? Because you deliberately made sure you had that for the purpose of not falling. So having a whole bunch of cards in your hands, as nice as it is, do not count that as being skillful, because that's not skillful. That's the opposite, right? It's like going camping, right? And you have somebody who has a RV and has all these, advanced technology, right? It has TV, microwave, all this stuff, right? It has all this advancements in there, right? Versus somebody who's just picking up like rocks and tree and wood and stuff like that, right? And they're starting fires, and then they're fishing, right? While you over here heating up a microwave dinner, frozen dinner in your microwave. It'd be weird to be like the person that's in the RV is more skillful than the person who's able to take leaves and tree branches and start a fire and fish and hunt and cook, right? Able to use branches and stuff and create a trap and catch a bear, in case a bear tries to attack, right? You can make a little bear trap and gives you enough time to survive. Like, that's more skillful, because that requires skill. Doesn't require you to have a debit card, right? Doesn't require you to have a nice bank account where you can afford an RV, right? Afford a microwave, afford TV dinner, right? In other words, afford for somebody else to do all the hard work for you, and all you do is benefit from the results of it, right? So there's a difference between skill and no skill, obviously. So that's why it's just funny to hear somebody say that drawing a lot of cards is skill. It's like, no, there's no skill in drawing a lot of cards. That's basic. That's mid at best. But being able to use 1 or 2 cards and and do more than your opponent can do with a 30 card hand, that's impressive. That's skill. And that's, a true test of skill is you doing the most with the least. That's the idea of skill. This is why we look up to people who can do things that other people can't do. It's like, oh my God, this person is missing a leg, yet somehow they're the fastest runner alive. Or this person is missing an arm, but they're the best handball player in the world, or some shit like that, right? Like some shit like that. Obviously, these are extreme ideas, but you get my point. It's like, wouldn't you be impressed by somebody only having one leg, but they're the fastest runner alive? Technically, they will be the fastest hopper alive, but you get my point, right? They're playing in a race, right? They're racing against other people, but they're able to outperform them by just hopping. While everybody else actually has two legs to run, but they lose to the person who hops, right? And that's the thing about being skillful, is that you can do what other people can't do. Like, for example, the whole super combo thing. People like bringing that up. So it's like, okay, somebody who doesn't use super combos should be viewed as more skillful than a person who does use super combos, because there has to be a reason for it, right? The person clearly can compensate for the lack of super combos. Just like a person missing an arm, or I should say missing a leg, can win, a two-legged race, right? It's because they're compensating. They're able to make the most out of that one leg, as opposed to a person with two legs or three legs or four legs, right? So imagine that. Imagine if that one-legged person was in a horse race, right? And they're hopping to the finish line, while all these horses that have four legs lose to this one-legged person, right? You wouldn't think that one-legged person is skillful, is amazing, compared to those four-legged horses? I wouldn't be like, oh, those horses are better because they got four legs. I'd be like, no, that one-legged person right there is amazing because that one-legged person won. And clearly, that person got skills to be able to achieve that, to be able to succeed where you think they wouldn't, right? But anyway, I talked long enough. Just my thoughts on the draw, greed, and mill debate.